is my honor to open the 68th ALPA Air Safety Forum. It's always a privilege to continue ALPA's 93-year-long tradition of advancing improvements in safety, security, pilot assistance, and jump seat. And through our work this week, we'll do our part, just as our predecessors did, to advance these causes for the future. I'd like to extend a warm welcome and thanks to everyone in this room and online, and especially the line pilots who safely fly passengers and cargo every day in the United States, Canada, and around the world. It's ALPA's line pilots who drive our union's agenda, and this forum is an extension and culmination of that drive. Pilots are the key to safe day-to-day operations of aviation. We see what works well and what needs improvement. When it comes to aviation, especially for safety, security, pilot assistance, and jump seat, pilots will always be the hands-on experts. The stakes of aviation safety are high as we gather here today. We're now on the back end of a global pandemic that effectively shut down our industry and put huge strains on the system as we recover. We've seen multiple near-miss events and the loss of a door plug at 16,000 feet. And against this backdrop, some special interests are actually waging a campaign to weaken the safety standards we have fought so hard for over ALPA's 93-year history. This is nothing new for ALPA pilots. We were founded on safety and the use of unified pilot voices to demand better, safer working conditions in the face of management indifference or corporate greed. Because of the hard work of ALPA members that came before us, as well as many of you in this room, that culture has changed. Pilots are now the final arbiters of safety, and safety is at the forefront of the entire system. But it is up to all of us and our continued vigilance to ensure that safety record we built is not undermined. Throughout history, we have spoken with a clear voice for safety, and it has always been our unity and solidarity that made our voice so powerful. As airlines work to exploit loopholes to skirt safety and security rules, as special interests pressure regulators to weaken training requirements, and as manufacturers work to remove the most important safety feature on any flight, the pilots, from the flight deck, it remains up to pilots to stop them. Not only are our lives on the line, but we have a duty to our passengers, cargo shippers, and the communities under our wings to defend their safety. Earlier this year, we saw what pilots can accomplish when they speak with a unified voice for safety. Despite a coordinated campaign by special interests, Congress passed an FAA reauthorization bill that advanced safety without any major ALPA concessions. During this forum, you will have the opportunity to hear from experts and share ideas about the most pressing issues facing aviation, including threats to aviation, cybersecurity, preserving pilot health, and the emergence of unmanned aircraft technology, and efforts to remove pilots from the flight deck. We will have the privilege of hearing from experts from around ALPA and the industry, including Administrator Michael Whitaker of the Federal Aviation Administration and Honorable Jennifer Homendy, Chair of the National Transportation Safety Board. It is through a constant commitment to understanding and analyzing safety data and then applying what we have learned to our operations that we have been able to build an unparalleled safety record. The collection and understanding of safety data are the only real window into the operational safety issues that occur every day on the line. The dedication to the importance and effective management of the safety data prevents serious threats and challenges to these programs. Our ASO pilots hold government and industry leadership roles in the evaluation of that data to provide guidance and best practices throughout the association. We have created a culture in the US and Canada that allows us and depends on pilots being able to speak up for safety without fear of retribution. The strength of our union enables us to advocate for both safety and challenges and protections for pilots who voice these concerns without the danger of disciplinary action or loss of employment. By protecting the right to raise concerns, we have the data necessary to make aviation, already the safest form of transportation, even safer. Because of the importance of being able to collect and analyze safety data, we've worked to strengthen how this data is used, including advocating for new protections for safety data in Canada. We have also established the Safety Management System Technical Group within the ASO to focus on safety risk assessments on all the issues facing our industry and make sure pilots and labor have a seat at the table. Through the work and advocacy of ALPA ASO pilots, we pushed regulators to recognize the threat of 5G on aviation and stood firm on the need for focused human factors research to improve our understanding of the role of pilots in improving aviation safety. ALPA's ASO is committed to identifying and understanding any potential threat to aviation safety and identifying solutions that improve safety and reduce unpredictability in aviation. We are meticulous in our efforts to identify and mitigate existing risks in aviation, but we must also be watchful for new risks that are being created in our industry, like reduced crew and single pilot operations. For more than a decade and a half, the United States has enjoyed the safest period in aviation history. It is no coincidence that the start of this period coincides with renewed commitment to ensuring that we have experienced, highly trained, and well-rested pilots on all flight decks. Put simply, pilots are the key to aviation safety. The pilots in this room know better than anyone that things can and do go wrong on any flight and at any time. We are trained and ready to address any issue in flight, from an engine fire to an automation failure. It's at least 2 pilots on the flight deck at all times that make the difference to ensure the safety of those on board. Line operational safety audit data shows that aircraft malfunction on 20% of flights. Yet because airline pilots are on the flight deck ready to save the day, there is a safe outcome 99.9994% of the time. When pilots are so good at creating safe outcomes from a potential disaster, it raises the question of why would anyone want to take pilots out of the equation? If a pilot saves the day 99.9994% of the time and an aircraft fails 20% of the time, who would you want calling the shots when you're flying with your family? Despite common sense saying we should keep at least 2 pilots on the flight deck at all times, some manufacturers, as well as regulatory agencies such as EASA, are working to design and certify aircraft that would take pilots off the flight deck during some phases of flight. Airbus and EASA are proposing what they call extended minimum crew operations, EMCO for short, where one pilot would stay on the flight deck during cruise while the other pilot would leave the flight deck to rest. If this system is permitted, it could open the door to full single pilot operations, because that's what this is, single pilot operations. No one to step in if a single pilot on the flight deck has a medical emergency. No division of responsibilities where you have one pilot flying while the other communicates, runs checklists in the emergency situations like, let's say, a door plug blows out in flight. There isn't even a backup if a pilot needs to use the lav. Many of us fly international. Imagine being in the middle of the Atlantic at night when all hell breaks loose and only one pilot to deal with the worst while the other pilot wakes and attempts to make their way back to the flight deck. Or worse, yet the single pilot in the flight deck is incapacitated when all hell breaks loose. Some say the chances of these situations are small percentages. However, we don't play that game with aviation safety. The flying and shipping public demands nothing less than 2 pilots in the flight deck at all times. There are many safety advances and priorities that we are proud to partner with Airbus on, including holding this forum. We have a long-standing, healthy relationship with Airbus for years, but some issues transcend the boundaries of partnerships, and less than 2 pilots on the flight deck during any phase of flight is an inherently flawed concept. None other than the CEO of commercial aircraft for Airbus, Kristen Scherer, recently acknowledged this risk in an interview, saying, and I quote, "All it needs to cater for the eventuality that this one guy just ate a bad oyster and is incapacitated and the airplane has to take over. So 1 pilot or 0 pilot is effectively the same thing," end quote. There are a million ways having fewer pilots on the flight deck could go wrong, and each one of them could cause an airline tragedy in the likes of which the United States has been spared of for over a decade and a half. I want to be crystal clear. Reduced crew and single pilot operations aren't some far-off fantasy. This isn't rhetoric for the Air Safety Forum that I'm making up. This is happening now. Aircraft with single pilot cruise operational capabilities through EMCO are slated to be in service in 2027. There are customers lined up, and regulators in Europe are pushing forward to allow it despite safety concerns. This is not a pipe dream or a PowerPoint presentation, but real engineering and certification work that is already underway. Through our 93-year history, we've learned that safety wins when pilots speak with one voice, and we're proud to stand with our colleagues around the world to stop this single pilot operations scheme, and we're making inroads. Together, with our partners around the globe in the International Federation of Airline Pilots Association and the European Cockpit Association, we're committed to ending this threat to aviation safety before it gets cleared for takeoff. Earlier this year, ALPA released a new white paper examining the ways that reduced crew and single pilot operations should be a non-starter. From real-world examples of how having at least 2 pilots on the flight deck saved the day to cybersecurity threats that could arise, our white paper makes it clear that reduced crew operations are a gamble with safety. In Europe, regulators are preparing to grease the skids for their local manufacturers, but U.S. lawmakers and regulators are standing up for safety. In the U.S. House and Senate, lawmakers passed language in the recent Transportation Appropriations Bill to prevent that funding from being used to support reduced crew operations, and recommitted to the importance of the presence of at least 2 pilots in Part 121 operations. During the nomination process for our next speaker, Administrator Whitaker, the Department of Transportation celebrated his commitment to keeping at least 2 well-trained pilots on the flight deck, a commitment that I wholeheartedly supported. To put a stop to the risks posed by reduced crew operations, we will need regulators like Administrator Whitaker and lawmakers to put safety first, even as manufacturers and airlines seek to prioritize profits. Our advocacy work is just as critical in preserving aviation security. As we acknowledged at the start with a moment of silence, today marks the 23rd anniversary of the September 11th attacks. And even though 23 years have passed, we are not done making security improvements from the lessons that we have learned through these horrific attacks. Last year, the FAA issued a new rule requiring the installation of secondary barriers on the flight deck of new passenger aircraft. This rule addressed a security gap that ALPA had been advocating to see implemented for years. The rule addressed a glaring flaw for new aircraft, but when the average age of a commercial airliner in the U.S. is over a decade, that isn't enough to address the security gap that exists today. In the FAA reauthorization bill, we advocated for action, and lawmakers responded by creating a pathway to mandate secondary barriers for existing passenger aircraft. We will continue to work with our government leaders to make sure secondary barriers are required on all passenger airliners, as well as continuing to advocate for primary flight deck doors on all cargo airliners. Over our history, ALPA has developed strong partnerships that allow us to work with airlines, manufacturers, regulators, and lawmakers to make our industry safer and stronger. As we all saw an uptick in unruly passenger events, we began working closely across the industry to address this issue. ASO pilots launched our In-Flight Crime Symposium to bring together experts from the TSA, FAA, FBI, and other stakeholders. Since their leadership and collaboration, we have seen a decrease in the number of unruly passenger events. We're continuing to collaborate through the In-Flight Security Working Group, which was formed after ALPA's ASO proposed and advocated for bringing together various government agencies and industry representatives. This summer, we partnered with the FAA on a social media campaign educating the public on their responsibility to behave appropriately on aircraft and the consequences if they do not. It's just as important that we work in partnership with lawmakers and regulators in all aspects of aviation. As conversations about supporting the mental health of pilots entered center stage over the past year, ALPA has been working with the FAA, NTSB, others, and across the industry to make sure that pilots are being supported. Last year, ALPA joined the NTSB's Navigating Mental Health in Aviation Summit, and because of ALPA's position as the leading and most respected pilots union, we were asked to co-chair the Mental Health and Aviation Medical Clearances Aviation Rulemaking Committee. Without the work of ASO pilots on this committee and across the industry, airline pilots would continue to face roadblocks and possible career impacts when seeking out mental health assistance. Their leadership lays the groundwork for creating a positive environment where pilots can talk about mental health, receive certain levels of therapy or treatment, and not fear the status of their careers. We also hosted our own roundtable to discuss pilot mental health and how we can better support our members. And in the FAA reauthorization bill, we fought for improvements to FAA aeromedical and successfully included a pathway for implementing the Aviation Rulemaking Committee's recommendations. Stress and mental health concerns can come in many forms and from many sources. But we need to make sure that when we fly, we're aware of how that can impact us as pilots. ALPA members are truly blessed to have those of you who are peers in our pilot peer support program to lean on if they need help. The work of our pilot peers across our organization can have life-changing impacts, and it is the volunteers who make it all possible. When someone gets help and support early, they become more resilient and in most cases can head off concerns before they become an issue that may impact their medical certification. During Mental Health Awareness Month, our Pilot Assistance Group launched the Are You in the Green campaign. The goal of the campaign is to help ALPA members understand how to better take care of ourselves and make us all aware of the resources and support available to all of us. When we're aware of our mental health, we're safer. And if you want more information about this, you can visit alpa.org/green. Another campaign that is critical to supporting our members as we all commute and travel is the Make a Walk campaign, reminding all of our members to check for jump seaters before departing. In some ways, the aviation industry runs on our ability to jump seat. The presence of a jump seater can also be a safety and security benefit as it adds an extra set of eyes to catch issues during an emergency or just a normal flight. Jump seating isn't just a perk of the job, it's a fundamental part of doing our job. The work of our Jump Seat Committee helps us all do our jobs more effectively and be with our families more often. Jump seating has the added benefit of helping pilots get home in the case of operational disruptions like the recent CrowdStrike outage, or if one of our pilot groups go on strike. ALPA was founded on safety, and today as we gather at this 68th Air Safety Forum, we continue that tradition. As pilots, we will never back down from our commitment to keep our skies safe, and we are proud to work with our partners across the industry, many of whom are represented here today, to advance this mission. As an industry, we have seen what can happen when we haven't done enough to protect safety and security. We've felt the pain. We've experienced the tragedy. But we've also learned lessons that we can never forget. Opportunities like this forum allow us to tear down any barriers and concentrate on the goal of ensuring that our industry never experiences another tragedy. I'll admit this is a lofty goal, but we've had remarkable success as an industry in achieving it, and there will always be more to accomplish. We must continue to fight for safety and security improvements in everything we do. Thank you.